But you didn't, so now you don't have to slither.
Okay, we're back. Darren, are you back? Did you ever leave?
I'm here.
Okay. When we went on break, we were talking about uh, physical abuse and where that line is and what sorts of things drive parents to the point of wanting to strike a child. We've switched chairs here because shortly Ginger's going to be taking over because of some experiences she's had that involve physical abuse, sexual assault, and so forth. But was there something that you wanted to add on? We were talking about how parents may feel, how you just get exasperated enough to smack your own child. Melanie?
I don't know if this is on that same line, but I was one of the kids who got spanked. My father's Italian, is very disciplinarian, authoritative, and you're taught to respect. And if you don't, you pay the consequences. Well, he would always tell me, before, during, and after he was spanking me, I'm doing this because I love you. I love you. Remember that. And I'm sitting here being spanked. It says, remember that you love me. I hate you. I don't care if you love me or not, But he always, and afterwards he'd hug me and say, sorry, I had to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's very important because I was one of those children that got it with the paddle. I got it with the peach tree switch, the slat out of the doll bed. I mean, it would take a while to name everything that I got spanked with, and whatever was most convenient to my mom, because she was the disciplinarian in the house. But it was not moderated with that kind of caring attention. It was, this is for your own good, you broke rule number whatever, and you deserve this, and you will straighten up, and so forth. So I determined that I would scream as loud as I possibly could so that all the neighbors would know she was beating me. Well, yeah. And so I don't know if that worked or her arm got tired. Eventually she found some other punishments, and I grew older, and that helped too. But there was some degree of hostility that developed there that never really went away. We got past it, and yet it wasn't good in some respects. Karen?
Whereas I grew up in a household where I did get spanked a few times, but I think I was conscious of that it was moderated by a lot of things. It was definitely the last resort. It was definitely one that came up with. It wasn't extreme, and it was frequently after I had tried. They tried other things, and if I was demonstrating that nothing else was getting through. And my father's, and in fact, I remember him saying to other people that his personal rule was he only used his own hand. You didn't go for bare bottoms, but he said because he used his own hand, because he said then he could tell. He said and you only spank people on bottoms. Then it was time to stop, and so he figured, and I knew, from my memories, I don't think I ever got spanked more than probably 3 times or 3 or 4 at any one instance. It just didn't take much. It was almost as much just the thing of you were being communicated. This was the ultimate. You have done it. You have really pushed the button, and that would generally get my attention of, whoops, I guess it's time to change what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I know that's what I was aiming for as a parent myself, but I know that you're talking about, but of course I also felt like, and looking back on it now, I have maybe a little more understanding. I was also doing this as a single parent, and wasn't even really planning on being the real hard disciplinarian of the single parent. I was sort of felt like I was cut out to be the softer model. And I married somebody who was strong, and Marine Corps Staff Sergeant. You kind of have some stereotypes that go along with that. And while he was alive, yes, that was the role he filled. But when he was gone, and I'm now raising a boy, and I realized that this was a different creature I had to deal with, and different things seemed to work. But there were times when just the sheer frustration of that I'm left with this that I didn't plan on having to do, and dealing with somebody who's strong and who's defiant and who's communicating to me of you can't make me, and that for a couple times I know that I became enraged enough that I don't think I ever actually, if I didn't ever become abusive, I certainly can understand the feelings that would lead you to do it.
Okay, and I think some key words you said there were frustrated and enraged. And all 3 of our girls got smacks on the thighs and backside when we thought they deserved them. But we tried not to do it out of rage But I understand that feeling. I had 3 girls in 4 years, and there were points where I was angry enough I could have really laid into them. Because you just reach points of exasperation. And I mean, here I had a PhD, I'm supposed to have some coping skills, and I'm at the limit of this. And so I'm going to kind of turn it to you now, because we're going to talk about people that are over the limit. So somewhere there's a line out there, but there's some cases where we know that people are completely over the line.
And we'll talk about stuff with kids for a little bit, and then we'll go more to adult physical abuse, assault. We all run across, whether we think about it or not, children who are in abusive situations. And it's hard to know what to do. It's hard to know whether to call CPS or whether it's your friend and you should talk to them about how they're handling their child. It's very touchy, the relationship between parents and children. And it's difficult as an outsider to know what to do, and it's difficult as a parent in the situation to know what to do. And you find yourself very much on the defensive. And I say that because we had a foster daughter for a while. She was a teenager. We had her for a little over 2 years, from 16 to 18. And she came from an extremely abusive home and had several siblings and was very concerned for the welfare of her siblings. And she took steps, once she was out of the home and living with us, she took steps to ensure that her siblings were out of the home also. And this was in Kansas, this wasn't here in Texas, and the laws are different, things are handled differently, somewhat differently. And eventually, over the course of a year, her siblings did go back home, and one of her other siblings was being sexually, well, her stepfather was pimping for her sister. We'll just, and
Get
so,
it out.
I don't know how else to
Somebody down here
put
is going
that.
to figure out who that was.
So that was, but there was nothing, the social service agency tried to do stuff about that, but the girl just ran away because she thought it was cool because she had this great relationship with her dad. So, yes?
I don't understand. He was hiring her out?
Right,
Selling his own daughter's services.
right. They were living in a hotel, and he was pimping her out to people he met. And she was 15. And having a great time, I guess.
Making good money, I guess.
It was very frustrating to have this teenager live with us, having been raised in this situation, a home that was full of abuse and lies and deceit. She was part of a case pressing charges against her mother for embezzlement of funds from a company, and this girl, I could understand how she could get on someone's nerves.
Me too, and I was only around her a couple of times.
She just talked like this, and she just was sure that she was so cute that she should get A's in school, and you should just do everything exactly the way she wanted it done. And, well, she just had no idea what her assignments were or anything. It was real annoying, trying to teach her to be responsible. There were times when I understood why her mother abused her. And that sounds like a terrible thing to say. And that's not to say that it was this child's fault. I mean, this was the family she grew up in. This was the society and the culture that she grew up in. And this is the way that she learned to be in order to defend herself, and the social skills that she gained, because that's the social skills that were modeled for her. Her mother was that way. So I understand it. But it was very difficult for me because I'm a very responsible, I'm a whole different kind of person than that. But nevertheless, I did not physically abuse her or touch her in any way because she didn't want to be touched at all. She didn't want to be hugged much unless she was trying to get something. But there was, and she had several boyfriends during the course of the time that she lived with us, and one of those boyfriends was, she really went for the guys who thought the 60s were cool and they were pacifists and they liked to wear the 60s clothes and let their hair be long and listen to Bob Dylan and be 60s. they didn't understand what the 60s were, but that's what they wanted to be. So that was okay until I found out that because they weren't having sex with each other, they were beating the crap out of each other on a regular basis, because they would start shoving and pushing each other, and then it would escalate to hitting, and pretty soon she was coming home with bruises. And I said, what's going on? And here was this kid from church who was a pacifist beating the garbage out of my foster daughter. I was responsible to the state for this child, not to mention the fact that I cared about her, but I was appalled that this was what they were doing. I didn't have words for it. And I met with him, and I talked to her, and I met with him, and I met with his parents, and I said, you guys, you can't hit each other. I mean, I'm glad you're having a good time together, but this is not the way to do it. And you have to make different choices. I understand this is the way you're raised. I don't care. I do not care if that was how you were raised. This is not acceptable. Well, eventually they broke up, and she got another boyfriend, and she chose not to graduate from high school. And I understand she's married and has a baby now, and I hope that her life is better. I don't know that it is, but it was sad to watch. It was sad to see her brothers and sisters go back into the home and continue to be beaten, and there was nothing anyone could do because they couldn't prove anything. It's just sad. And I think as parents and adults, we need to just pay attention and do what we can and help kids when we can and try to do the best we can. My parents came from homes that were not the best, but they chose different. They chose to be different, and they were. You can be different than how you were raised. It's a choice. You have to work at it, but it is a choice. Okay. I've had friends who've been in real abusive situations also. I was in an abusive situation once, and I think that's the key for me. Somebody hit me once, and I left because I didn't want to be hit. Once was more than enough. In the United States, a woman gets beaten every 9 seconds. At least 1/4 of those women are pregnant at the time. This is not to say that men never get beaten by women or by other men. And this is not an O.J. Simpson kind of deal. This is just, these are the statistics. That's alarming. That's wrong. National statistics show that half of the females in the United States are physically abused. 1/3 of females in the United States will be sexually assaulted at some time in their lives. An article in the Washington Post stated that according to federal crime statistics, women are physically assaulted 2.5 million times a year in the United States. It's alarming because even though our crime statistics are going down, among the youth, violent crime is going up. So we have to think about our kids and the kids of our friends and young people that we deal with and know. 1 in 6 violent crimes in the United States happens at work. From 1987 to 1992, an average of 971,500 violent crimes occurred in the workplace annually. These statistics are from a July 24th, 1994 Justice Department Crime Statistics Report. There were 13,100 rapes annually, 79,100 robberies, 264,200 aggravated assaults, and 615,200 simple assaults at work. Yes?
What was the time period?
That per year, annually. Those are average annual statistics from 1987 to 1992. Yeah, July 94, right? Yes.
Um, Personal experience of mine last week. I live in a house where one room of the house is a what do you call it? Efficiency for another guy, and he goes in another entrance, and that's his deal. Well, last week he was robbed, but they thought they were breaking into my house because they don't know anyone's back there. You can't see it. Just that happening, the one window that doesn't have bars on it, they got in, took everything from him. But they thought they were getting in my house, and that struck something in me. I live alone. I live in Montrose, not the safest area. And to think that someone wanted to get into my house and tried and thought they had accomplished it, and maybe they're still watching, that was enough for me. I felt almost intruded upon, and I'm leave the lights on at night, and I didn't stay there that night, and I've taken all precautions. But sometimes it takes something like that to trigger it, because you think you're in this isolated world, and then something happens closer to you, and you click, and it makes all the difference.
The rise in violent crime in the United States has caused a huge growth in the self-protection industries. And I've read a lot of articles about that, and what they're saying is, people have the pepper gas and the mace, but the research shows that what works, that you have to be so close to use that, and that they can turn it on you. But what seems to work the best are the personal alarms that are so loud that anybody would run to get away from them. I mean, just startles them and gives you a chance to get away. That because it's not a stun gun, which you have to be 3 inches from the person to use. I mean, you have to be on top of them to use it, or a real gun, or a knife. None of these are really good choices, but that the best thing that they have found is the loud personal alarms, just for personal information, but they're making a lot of money off our fear. Just sad. Other federal crime statistics show that murders by spouses and significant others have decreased by 18% since 1970, but the physical assaults have increased. So people are getting beat up instead of killed. They stop short of killing.
Does this take into effect like all the ones that are unreported?
No.
I mean, there's so
These
many
are
that are
just
unreported.
these are just the report. That's all they can go on is the reported incidents. No, there are probably millions that go unreported. On this visual, we have the cycle of domestic violence. First, you have calm. Everything seems to be okay. Then stress and tension develop. You can feel it. Then there's an explosion of violence. And it's always your fault. And if you would just be good or do the right thing.
The old see what you made me do?
Yeah, right. Cook a better dinner, keep the house cleaner, wash my shirts better, whatever.
Get the beer in here faster.
Yeah. Go to work and make more money so I wouldn't have to. I don't know. There's a
You
million
shouldn't have walked
things.
in front of the TV.
Yeah. And then calm is temporarily restored and the cycle repeats itself. There are warning signs that you can look for. If your significant other or your parent pushes and shoves a lot, or has outbursts of jealousy, or verbally taunts you, verbally abuses you, these can be warning signs that you could be in the process of being physically abused, that could happen. A really good friend of mine, her husband just withheld. He didn't ever physically hurt her. He came home from a trip one time. He'd been gone for a week, and she went out to greet him at the car. And he got mad at her because she hadn't allowed him enough space before he got in the house. And he wouldn't talk to her. or touch her or have sex with her for more than a week because she was wrong to invade his space. He wasn't ready to see her yet. Physical abuse comes in all kinds of shapes.
All the women just turn red in the room.
I have another friend who would do, it wouldn't matter what she had done. Her significant other would just go into these enormous rages and throw things across the room, and I would go to their house and there would be ketchup and mustard all over the ceiling and forks stabbed into the wall and just, amazing things. I love you. Why do you do this? Why don't you get away? I never could understand. I mean, but I understand that if you get beaten down enough, and the longer you stay in the relationship, the more likely you are to stay, unless you explode. And
I have an experience of that. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy. My mom now, we've been living without my father for over 2 years. He's actually left town and he's in the valley now, and he's been gone since July of last year. And she's constantly, for the whole 23 years they've been married, has always been told, you're worthless, you're not worth anything. And here it is now, almost a year that he's been gone and completely out of our lives, even though we're still going through that stress with him all the time. She still doesn't feel that she could do anything, that she's still beaten down. I mean, she goes out and finds jobs that aren't even near anywhere her potential, just so that she can have an excuse or just to say, well, I can never amount to anything, I can never do better. She always has that in her mind, it's never going to change.
you hear it enough and you do believe it. It takes tremendous willpower to overcome it and lots of support. Yes.
And I mean, I never truly understood that until, and this was like a short, 3-week period. I worked at this one job because I work temporary currently, have been for the last year and so. Well, most of the time, people go in and they're very pleasant to me and everything's fine. I got to this one assignment, and the person who was there at the same time was almost ranting and raving about the boss, and I know my eyes must have gotten as big as saucers, and I'm thinking, this woman is out of her, has flipped her lid. What is going on? And the boss was reasonable to me, and I just kind of thought, and she was telling me about, things that happened to other people, and I'm just thinking, well, I just wouldn't put up with that. No. Well, then the other person was let go, and I was handling things there myself. And I started to discover that, yes, slowly I was being made to feel that I wasn't really working quite as fast as other people would handle on this job. And so I found myself starting to stay late, but not charged for that time. Well, I wasn't, I obviously must not have been quite up to speed, so I'll, give a little more. And yet that wouldn't get recognized. That was just sort of what was supposed to happen. And so gradually, it was amazing. Over 3 weeks, I really did start to feel my self-esteem start to erode from being told that I wasn't working fast enough, that I wasn't doing this effectively, I wasn't being a good secretary. And as I say, and I was just amazed at the end of the 3 weeks. When I was done, had got rescued from that assignment, basically, I spent a good half hour ranting and raving, well, probably even longer than that, ranting and raving to other people about this person, and I could see where if you stayed long enough, you would start to feel like, I'm not worth more than this. In fact, the person who was there before me said, now you go be sure you take your lunch hour. Don't get like I am and get sucked into giving it up. And I started to realize with that, I think I talked about this at the double message, that I could see where she ended up sacrificing her lunch hours, because the double message there was, since you weren't getting it all done, you really don't deserve one.
Robert?
Was it a male or female supervisor?
Female.
And just to add also, now in our arguments and stuff at home, when my mom and I fight or my sisters fight, we're constantly degrading each other, constantly, because that is all we've ever been used to. Instead of having a healthy, instead of having a healthy relationship, okay, you should have done this, and I maybe should have done this, and just forgiving each other, we're constantly bickering at each other, little bitty things, because that is all we're used to, is fighting and having that being degraded and downgraded. And I'm always having a problem with self-esteem.
I think there's another area that you haven't touched on yet, is abuse between siblings. I mean, my parents, I'll praise them to the end, to the end of the world, and the abuse I received was from my brother. I mean, mental, sexual abuse, whatever. And only through therapy have we even got the relationship we have today. I mean, it's almost like my childhood didn't happen because we do have a relationship now. And it's wonderful. I mean, he's a wonderful man now. But he made my childhood hell. And it's like I volunteer at the boys' home kind of because I hated my adolescence. I hated my childhood, and I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to discuss it because I dealt with it, I felt like, on my own. And then when they were ready to deal with it, it was brought back up, and that pissed me off. But that occurs a lot between siblings
It does.
also.
And we should, oh, go ahead, Melanie.
I'm just going to respond to what you were saying about degrading and saying things that you really probably don't mean. I lost my mother when I was very young, and something that I learned, I find myself holding on to relationships and afraid that somehow it's going to end or they'll go away or something. And I find that something that I've learned and really taught myself is that you never, or you try not to say something that you don't mean. And I never go to sleep at night with a bad thought or saying something mean as a last word to someone, because you just don't know. You just never know. And you try not to say things you don't mean. If you have to, walk out of the house, because you just don't know what might happen. And if not, like, children without the cognitive skills and the moral skills thinking that it's their fault, but even adults sometimes, if you say, I wish you'd leave, and they did and they die, then, so
Well,
that's one rule that I go by.
And you have a choice. You can say, okay, I just can't deal with this right now. I'll say something I'll regret, so that you can leave and regroup and then come back and say, okay, now, I'm calmer now, and we have a problem and we need to work this out. And then you can calmly do that. But you have a choice to walk away until you're better. And to say, I'm not mad at you, or I'm too
If you're
angry
the
to talk to you.
aggressor.
Yeah, true.
But the battered people, usually women, often don't have a choice.
Right.
They don't have a place to go. They can't, 1 month in a shelter, and then what?
And then you get in that cycle too, where my parents were always drunk. My father was always not sober, and we would get into these arguments, and I would just get so outraged and start screaming and yelling and stuff, and without even thinking that, he's not really even listening to what you're saying, because he can't even comprehend it, And then the next day, it's as if nothing ever happened, and he's bringing toys and gifts and stuff, and I can see where abused women get in that relationship too, because they're like, oh, well, he says that he's going to be better and stuff, so you keep hoping and you keep wanting that challenge to make him better, and then of course it
And
happens
back in
again,
that
and then
cycle.
it keeps happening.
And that makes everything your responsibility, everything your fault. Well, there are important things to remember if you are in a situation where you're battered, or if you're overcoming a situation where you have been battered, is that you are not alone. That's sad, but it's true. It's happy. It's a good thing that you're not alone, that you have support, but it's sad that there are so many people who are in that situation. You did not ask for this. You do not deserve this. Yes?
Just a quick interjection. These women that are in the battered home, they can hear all the time, and maybe they even know they're not alone, it's not their fault. But if they're not allowed to leave the house to go to support groups, if they're not allowed to talk to their friends, can't even see their family sometimes.
Right.
I mean, if you're around it 24 hours, 7 days a week, how do you deal with it by yourself? That's what the women are. They feel like they're trapped. You see them on talk shows all the time.
And that's when you may get numbing and desensitization and some of those other things that are less healthy, but they're survival mechanisms.
I don't have easy answers. There aren't pat answers. If you have a friend or a relative in that situation, you need to do everything you can to help them get out. But you can't make them do that. The only person who can change their lives is them. But this kind of situation is not normal. And there is help. but you might have to wait. The Houston Women's Center sometimes has waiting lists. You can't always get in. Depends on the time of year. Depends on how many other people got beat up that weekend. Got there first. But people are not for hitting. There's other stuff in your book about that. Anyway, now we'll go into rape. I don't have a smooth segue. Sexual assault. Just another kind of physical assault. Just another kind of physical assault. Yes?
No.
Oh, I thought you were reaching to say something.
Oh, I was going to say because at least, I mean, I didn't know if you meant that as a rhetorical question or not, because it's certainly, depending on how you've been raised and everything else, but somehow there's just so many other things that go along with that permutate that somehow rape has a much more onerous thing. It isn't just another physical assault. It's more.
She was being sarcastic.
I was being sarcastic, but I'm glad you recognized it. Rape myths. Rape is sex. Rape is only sex because sexual organs are involved. Lust causes rape. No. Wrong answer. Only bizarre, weird loners are rapists. Wrong. Women bring rape on themselves. Wrong. Good women don't get raped. Wrong. When I was 13, I heard a sermon. I was at a youth rally. This minister came out, and it was the late 60s, probably 68, 69. This minister came out and told us if we wore miniskirts, we were just asking to be raped. And he preached about that for 45 minutes. 8 years later, when I was raped, the first time, I believed it. I deserved it. I probably had done something to cause that to happen. I was raped 3 more times after that in a 2-year period. All of them different. No, I didn't set myself up. Might not have made the best choices, but I didn't ever ask for it. But that tape kept playing in my head. I was sure I deserved it. It was my fault, and so I never told. I just repressed it. I numbed myself. I did all the things we talked about for PTSD victims. I pretended that it didn't happen. The first time I was raped, it was by a friend. I was going to spend the day with him and his children. I had been up for 36 hours. I worked nights, and I hadn't slept the day before, so I was going to take a nap first. And he was going to go pick up his kids. He was divorced. I woke up with him raping me, screaming my name at the top of his lungs. So I grabbed my clothes and ran out of shoved him off me, grabbed my clothes, ran out of the apartment, and put my clothes on as I was driving across town. Well, that probably didn't really happen. I probably deserved for that to happen. I shouldn't have trusted him. I shouldn't have gone to sleep in his apartment. Except he was my friend, and he was supposed to leave, but he didn't. I didn't press charges. I didn't tell anybody. The second time I was raped, I was test driving a car. Pretty normal thing to do. Car salesman pulled out a knife while we were driving. Had me pull over and raped me. And then we went back to the car.
On a city street?
In a park. I'm sorry, in a park. Gave me directions to turn, go in here, stop here. You know, knife. Yeah. Yeah, he knew exactly what he was doing. I just couldn't believe that happened. I just could not believe that happened. But I figured I probably deserve that too. Probably something I did was wrong. So I didn't tell, and I didn't report it. The third time I was raped, I was walking home from the grocery store, and someone that I worked with pulled up and offered me a ride home, and that was fine. And so he helped me get my groceries upstairs and to my apartment, and I put them away, and he hit me and knocked me out and tied me to the bed and raped me. He was dating my cousin. I did tell her. Made her really mad at me. So I figured I deserved it, and I didn't tell anybody else. The last time I was raped, had gone dancing at a club with my boyfriend, and I don't know what happened. He left, but he didn't tell me. I don't know if he got drunk and left. I don't know what happened. But the club closed, and I was walking across this vacant lot to my car, and this large, disgusting, filthy biker human being came out of nowhere and ripped my clothes off and raped me, threw my keys out away, and when he finished, he left, and I safety pinned my dress together and looked for my keys in the dark and drove home. I shouldn't have been at that club alone. It was my fault. I deserved it. I didn't tell anybody. None of those things are true. I did not deserve it any of the times that it happened. But because I repressed it, I lived the next several years of my life reacting to everything. I didn't make many conscious actions, and when I did, it caused chaos, and so I would react to the chaos. So my life was just a series of reactions because I was real messed up inside. But I got better. I got help. But it's amazing how many women, the statistics say 1 in 3, you run across who've been sexually assaulted or raped or molested. One of my daughter's friends was sexually molested in the library at school a few weeks ago, and she's pressing charges, and I'm proud of her. She's 13.
You losing it up there?
I'll be okay. You don't have to put up with it. A girl came into Dr. Hunn's office last week. She'd been sexually molested. She's pressing charges. She doesn't have to put up with it.
And she came in to explain that she would miss class because she had a subpoena to appear in court. And she felt like she had to justify that absence. You know, because she wanted to be sure that this was an excused absence. I said, yeah, no, go for it. Yes, this is an excused absence.
There was a girl, almost every semester you have someone in your crisis, every time you teach this class, who's been raped. But it's so hard. You can't just go around saying, hey, I was raped. I'm a multiple rape victim. You don't do that. It invades your innocence. It takes part of you away when that happens. And if you talk about it to the wrong people, they can hurt you more.
Because they'll make you believe it was your fault.
Some of the research they've been doing talking about rapes with rape crisis centers and with male significant others in the lives of women who've been raped. And I don't want to sound like I don't think men are raped, because I know that there are men and boys who are in situations where they are sexually assaulted, and it happens more and more, and it is just as tragic and just as painful. But I'm not male. So I can relate, but I can't talk about it from personal experience because the shape of my skin is way different than that. But one of the things that they found through some of the research they've done is that most rape crisis centers do not employ men. or very few men. And so there aren't a lot of role models or support groups for male significant others in the lives of rape victims. And they don't know necessarily, our society hasn't taught them how to react to that, and so often they react inappropriately, or they do the very best they can and struggle and try to grasp at straws and do the right stuff, and sometimes they luck out and they do the right stuff, and sometimes they don't. And they find themselves estranged or bumbling over themselves and being in situations where they don't know what to do. And it's really hard to say because everybody's different. Sometimes, if you've just been raped or sexually molested, you want someone to hold you and to care and to comfort you, whether it's male or female. And sometimes the last thing you want is for anybody to touch you. You have to ask permission. You have to talk to the people and find, you just have to say, do you want a hug? Do you want me to touch you? Do you want me to hold your hand? Is this okay? Is that okay? Because it's different, and you just never know. And it depends on how you were raped and what happened, or how you were molested, and if you're terrified and a trembling mass of nerves and emotions, and you need somebody to just be a caregiver and totally take care of you so that you can fall apart for a while. But you need people to care. And you need people not to blame. And people not to accuse. There are important things to remember if you are raped, that you do need to report it to the police. It was 17, 18 years ago, the first time I was raped. At that point in time, it wasn't a real good choice to report rapes to the police. We were pretty much treated like garbage. If they found the guy, even if you could identify him, and if you knew him, well, forget it. You were going to be crucified in court. If you testified in court, they would defame you every way they could. They would just tear you apart. It was a really not a very supportive system at that time. Now, things have changed a lot, and it is far better, and they don't grill you and make you feel so much that way, although they do some still. But it's better than it used to be. And sometimes they do catch the people. And sometimes it's worth it. But we have to teach people, not just men, but women. We have to teach children that it's not okay. If somebody says no, that's what they mean. And it's not okay to inflict yourself on someone else physically in that way. It's just inappropriate. And when we have the rape crisis centers, they put Band-Aids on bleeding wounds, on gaping wounds, and for the Women's Crisis Center also, because there's so much damage that's been done already. It takes such a long time, and we need to work more on preventative maintenance. Does anybody have anything they want to say? Yes.
Were your parents or anybody there for caregiving at the times whenever that occurred?
Yes, and it was very frustrating for my parents because they saw this drastic change in me. My mother is a social worker with their LSCSW, and she's a licensed therapist and very good at what she does. And my father ran a children's home and dealt with kids who were in trouble. And I mean, I had the most wonderful, best parents, but I could not tell them I had so much shame and so much guilt. And they tried everything to make me better. But they didn't know what was wrong.
Yeah, they didn't know the cause.
And so they couldn't, and they were so frustrated. And so when I finally, my husband, and I need to say, I am married. I have a wonderful husband. He's very sweet, very kind. We have a great relationship. We've been together for a really long time. Just so that you know that, should you ever meet my husband, Bob is a great guy. He's been real supportive and has really helped me through, because I didn't admit that this stuff had happened until after we were married. And yeah, we were having problems, and it was real, yeah, it was real ugly for a while, but I have this amazing human being that lives at my house and shares my life. And Anyway, but yeah, I have wonderful, wonderful parents who tried everything they could. And if I had told them, then they would have been amazingly effective and could have helped me. But because I kept saying, no, I'm fine. Just because I'm not sleeping and I'm working all the time and I'm running around and I'm making choices that aren't really very good, but I'm great. I'm just great. Well, it wasn't. Yes.
I'm trying to imagine what happened to you, and I just can't. In my mind, I think that by the second, third, and fourth time, in such a short amount of time, I would have thought it was me too. I mean, it keeps happening to you, and how, if there's no support system really, and no one knows, and you can't tell anyone, or you feel you can't, you just keep thinking, not again, not again, you know. And I can understand how you must have felt. Just not. At first, I'm thinking, why didn't you go to someone? But after it happens like that, the same.
Who do
feeling.
you tell?
Yeah.
I mean,
The minister who preached the sermon.
Yeah. And we didn't have I mean, I'm very religious. I go to church. I'm very involved. I do a lot of good, wonderful things for people, and I relied on God, and that's what got me through. Because we had an amazingly terrible minister then, an amazingly terrible minister, who has since gotten out of the ministry, praise God, and is doing other things, and that's delightful, and I'm happy for him, and he's had a rough life and is in a much better place today than he was then. But he had already caused tremendous damage through some other things that had happened, and so I didn't feel like I had anyone I could go to in the church either. Not because they weren't loving and supportive, but who do you tell? You don't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I was raped last night. And they go, what do you say when somebody says that to you? Because you don't.
Really?
Yeah. No, I'm making it up. I just didn't have anything else to do, so I thought I'd see if I could get a shock out of you. Yeah, it was just wild, and I'm really glad that that was then and this is now. In some way, because I have a daughter, I hope that because it happened to me so much, it'll never happen to her. And when I told her, and I had talked to her about it before, but she's almost 14 now, so I want to make sure that she knew, because she may have friends who watch this tape, and, it could be really bad, but I talked to her long before this.
And that's what your mom said on TV the other
Did you know about your mom? She just looked at me. I mean, she thought it was really cool that I could talk to her about it, but she just looked at me. It's like, okay, Mom, thanks for the information. I know that it had to overwhelm her. And I have a good, my daughter's 13, and I talk to her whether she wants to talk to me or not. But I'm not mean about it. I just say, well, I just have some things I need to say to you, and so if you'll just kind of be here while I talk, I'd really appreciate it. And if you want to give me some feedback, that'd be great, but if not, that's okay too. But someday I hope you'll talk to me again. That would be really great, and because I miss you a lot. But, and that makes her laugh, and sometimes she talks to me, but not often, but it's not a big deal. But when you have children, you need to talk to them about it. Or if you have an opportunity, I mean, you need to educate kids about physical rights and what's right and what, I mean, have a son, and trust me, I will talk to my son, because I don't want him to do that to anybody ever, and I don't want him to make a girl uncomfortable. I would hurt him. I mean, I wouldn't like physically abuse him. I would find that line. I'm confident I would find that line and say,
He'd lose his power rangers. He'd lose his jealousy.
your father may have to deal with you on this one. Because your mom is way too angry to even get in the same room with you at this point in time. But if we don't talk to our kids about it, if we don't talk to kids about it, how can they know? It's, for the longest time, I remember when I was growing up, and I know that I had a real strange family, But we talked about sex at the dinner table. And we talked about what it was like, because my sister would come in when she was 3 and 4 and talk about how the baby kittens were born and give us graphic details about how the baby kittens came out of the mother cat, because she sat there and watched it all. So, I mean, we had these lovely discussions about it. Wasn't a big deal to talk about sex. And so we all knew all this stuff, and it wasn't a big, it was never a big deal. I mean, it wasn't a hush-hush subject, which makes it even less sense that I didn't talk to my parents, but you know, things don't always make sense. So you don't always make the best choices. I don't know why. If I went back, I probably would do it differently, but I don't want to go through that pain again. So I'll just stick with the choices I made and kind of go on from here. But I know often, even in, I have another friend who was date raped, and that was really traumatic for her. I mean, she knew the guy, and he raped her. They went up, I don't know, they got into dinner or something, and then he walked her to her apartment and shoved her in the door when she unlocked it and raped her. Her reaction, the choices that she has made since then have been to take some of those really serious physical defense classes where you beat the crap out of guys dressed in football pads, and she's even taken the more advanced ones where they come at you with guns and stuff, and boy, she can wipe out 3 guys in 15 minutes. I'm telling you, she's just... And she's just has this rage about it still. Well,
and there's a hypervigilance about her.
She's real
ready. I mean, you better not step out
don't-
from behind
don't-
the door in the dark.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't want to do that. It's a choice, and I could have made that, but I don't want to live my life that angry. I don't want to live my life in fear. I don't want to be ready to beat people up, because I hug people, I love people, I hold them when they're upset. That's my personality, that's how I am. And for me to be ready to beat people up and just ready to jump into action, it's just really not me. So, but everybody's different, and that makes her, and she's single, and it makes her feel safer. And I'm proud of her for doing that, because that's what she needed to do, and that's hard. I mean, it was seriously difficult. She injured her body taking these classes, but it was a big deal to her, and the sense of accomplishment and the sense of safety that she has are very important to her. Yes?
Don't you think there was just an excuse, well, not just, but also an excuse for acting out in anger? Because you really can't do anything about it, and the system is not supportive whatsoever. Even to women you don't confide in.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel funny. I know I'm on 33 counties, and wonder how many people I'm going to see walking across campus saying, oh, yeah. But it's important, and so I share, yes.
And this class, I guess, in a chance of learning how to communicate with someone when they tell you this is important, because, and it's, my mother's deceased, 5, 6 years now. It's much too late to go back and do anything. But my mother did tell me at some point that she was, it was on the verge of, this is back, this was like, I mean, she grew up in the 30s and stuff, and like she went to, I guess, for some kind of exam, and back in those days doctors didn't keep the nurse in the room, and she was telling me, well, the doctor basically was going to rape her, and then something happened and that stopped it. And that, she said she tried to tell the landlady who had recommended this doctor to her, and that woman just became all upset and, didn't want to hear it, kind of thing. And I have to admit, I don't think I reacted very well to my mom. I kind of just didn't believe her. And I'm thinking now, that was obviously the wrong thing.
Well, moms don't get raped.
That's just too. That's just, especially because my mother was 35 when I was born, so my mother was my mother was probably in her 50s when she's telling me this, and that's just such a, I'm thinking, and this is back in those really old days. Nobody raped anybody then, when doctors don't rape people, So I really would like, if nothing else, to learn that the next time somebody tries to tell me something like that I respond better, that I don't say I don't believe you.
Even if it's made up, it's always better to respond lovingly and with a caring attitude than to not believe.
No,
Yes.
go ahead.
No, that's all I was going to say.
No, what you were saying about, being around 33 counties and all that. I mean, I feel that way in this class. I don't talk to anybody about any of the stuff that's ever happened to me. And I don't really have told everybody exactly what happened in my life, But for me, it's good to just get it out. And I know half of you I will never see again, probably ever in my life. But it's like it's out, Somebody knows. It's not just here in me by myself, And again, with those personal relationships, it's hard for me to have relationships with anybody, especially male. I mean, with my boyfriend, we've been dating for 5 years. He's the only other significant man in my life besides my father. And we went through a very, very horrible period of time where I couldn't even let him hold my hand or get near me for fear that he was going to hurt me like my dad did. And you go through all these things and stuff, and I don't really know anybody who's ever been raped. I don't know anybody who's been sexually abused. I've never known anyone else but me to ever be abused or anything. And I think sometimes it's because of the way that I act. I mean, I never threw temper tantrums. I never, screamed and hollered and stuff. I just took everything inside and hid everything inside of me and made straight A's and made a 4.0 in high school. I did everything I thought was going to make my dad proud, and still nothing has changed. And I still can't accept that. And I don't think you ever do, because it's always there in your head.
And for kids, it's even harder because who do you tell that your sibling or your father or your mother is sexually molesting you? Who do you tell? Who's safe?
My
And
mother
how do you
never
know?
believed me. My mom never believed me, and to this day, I mean, she knows it happened, but she just doesn't even,
It's hard to admit that someone that you love is hurting someone else that you love. It's hard to believe that and to justify it and make it all make sense. And I know that that's part of it, but denial is a large part of it also.
Well, I appreciate how much you all are sharing. The stack of, as I indicated before class, the stack of papers that I read for this class. I mean, there's a limited number of sexual assault and abuse in there. But this class has been going on for many years now. And you're all carrying baggage. And there are people in my life that I've known for years, and we all look okay. We put on our outside person and we do what the world expects us to do. And sometimes it takes years before someone trusts you enough to disclose that information. And a most unlikely person over coffee one day, a couple of years ago now, owned up to having been abused by her father. And this was a woman that I'd known well, I thought, for, 8 or 10 years. And it was hard not to go, my goodness, but to stay level and to go ahead and talk through it and work with that. And, I'm not saying go out and dump all your crises on the first person you meet, because some of us aren't ready to handle that. But just know that virtually every human being you encounter is carrying a gunny sack full of really heavy rocks around. They have different shapes, they have different sizes, and even though I look out at 180 students in one class on test day when they all come, and everybody looks okay, and yet the odds are they aren't. And if we'd be willing to share and talk to each other more. But go ahead.
Isn't it absolutely appalling, though, that if somebody says somebody held a gun to me, people will go, oh, that's terrible, that's just... But if somebody says I was raped or something, people go, what? Or they kind of cock back a bit. It's just appalling to me. But though you say there's more of a support system, in being a paralegal, I see too many people get victimized twice, once by the aggressor and once by the legal system, and I don't find that there is a great support system out there.
Like, it's better than it used to be, but it's still not great. I don't know, if it happened today, I would be more likely to press charges. If he lived.
And also in response to what she just said, she doesn't know anybody personally that's been raped. I would tell you that you probably know 20 people that have been raped, because many more never say a thing about it.
The few people, there's only one girl that I'm extremely good friends with, and that's only been now because we went through a lot of the same experiences, and she's 31. but and we have not spoken to each other for 8 months because she was going through an extremely bad time of remembering everything and stuff, and she did not want me anywhere near her because to her I was everything that she had gone through, and she just did not want. It hurt like hell. It hurt me so bad, and only now have we started to talk again, you know, and I know that's why she didn't want me around her, was because we were so similar.
There's also this initial feeling of being abandoned, like you said, your friend. If you confess to certain things, people do abandon you. It's like when I was widowed, all of a sudden, people just sort of stood away. All of a sudden, you must bring death with you or something. Yeah, and you do get abandoned if you are traumatized in life.
It does happen.
Well, and your role changes, too. You know, you're a potential threat, a potential intruder. Who are you now that you're not married anymore? And there are lots of, we've got widowed instances here and divorce instances, but the people have to go back and reassess who you are and whether that role has changed and whether anything inside has changed. What do we do to your outline?
Okay,
You
well,
idea
yeah,
where you are.
I have some more. Yeah, I know kind of where I am. Okay, when we do, some research that they've done about date rapes associated with college campuses. You know, the women's revolution has been a wonderful thing in many ways, but one of the things that they're finding is that women on college campuses are consuming more alcohol, and they're finding that 90% of the rapes that are reported, alcohol was involved by one or more parties. Defenses are down. People make less appropriate choices. You might fall asleep. You might pass out. You know, all kinds of things happen. You might be more flirtatious or less flirtatious, or, you know, I don't know. A million different things could happen, combinations. But so I would, if you are, I don't date. I've been married for a really long time, so I haven't dated in a long time.
That's good, Ginger.
Yeah, that's a real fine combination, isn't it? Yeah, I wouldn't want to be out there dating, and I worry about my kids when they start dating, but I'm sure just like every other parent does. But you want to have good coping skills and good ways to say, do y'all have any words of advice? Some of y'all are dating, some of y'all were dating more recently than I. Yes, Melanie?
Well, on kind of a personal level and relating to the dating thing, but I lost my virginity really late compared to all my friends. So for a long time, even in college, I was dating guys, and you know, I had a certain line, and that's where things stopped and things ended. And I look back now that I have a boyfriend, and I'm kind of in a safe atmosphere, and I can look out at my friends that are dating and think, God, I'm sorry. But there was one time I almost was raped, and plenty other times I could have been. Not because I put myself in a bad situation, maybe to a certain extent, but because a lot of guys just assume if you go out on a date with them, or if you agree to meet them at their apartment or something, that you're ready to go to bed with them. And knowing in my mind that there was no way, it never crossed it until, you know, some things would happen, and I'd be like, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave. And they got offended, and
But I
could have
spent
been
so much money
outraged.
on you this evening.
Right.
Or this is the third
Well,
date.
here, I'll pay you back. So, you know, I don't know how to handle that because.
Shall I write you a check?
Yeah, exactly.
You take credit card.
Sorry.
Over here.
So as far as your children, there's just decisions they have to make, and they have to be so strong out there. It's tough. Dating.
I haven't been dating for 5 years. My boyfriend and I have been together for 5.5 years, and I can say he's the only person that I ever dated. He's the only person I'm ever going to be with. But what I found really effective for my girlfriends who've been in that situation is, if it's a first date and you're not really comfortable with this person or don't know too much about them, meet them somewhere. Meet them at a public place, not dimly lighted, not, you know, where there's going to be a lot of alcohol. If you know that you're prone to having problems with alcohol, like I don't drink, so I know if I had one drink, I would be out. You know, so make sure that you feel comfortable with yourself. Don't, you know, give out your phone number. Don't give out your address too soon. You know, and pay for half the day, pay for the movie while he pays for the dinner so that you don't feel obligated or he doesn't think that you owe him something, especially if you don't know anything about him too much.
Not that all guys do feel that way. Let me just add that
Right,
in. There's
right.
so many nice guys
But that's
out
good
there.
advice.
And you just need to take precautions. You just need to pay attention and be aware. Because this is your life. You only get one. So you should pay attention as you go through. Anything else?
I think it makes a difference too where you've met the person. Is this a friend of a friend? Not that that's a perfect thing as in your case, but is this someone that you picked each other up in a most unlikely place, or did you meet in a bar? Did you meet in church? Did you meet through a mutual friend that you trust?
Or in the frozen food section of the grocery store.
Right, etc.
Yes, ma'am.
My sister went to Syracuse and she rode. She was in crew. She was raped by a man who was a good friend of her boyfriend. And she was walking home in the snow to her apartment one night, and he offered to carry her groceries. And then when they got there, he said, he lived nearby. He said, why don't you just come over? We'll have a glass of wine, whatever. She woke up. When she woke up, he was raping her. And all she saw was, I guess she had passed out, one of those drinking things, and she saw blue walls. So now every time she sees bright blue wall or a big area of blue, she goes into the
Flashbacks?
Yeah, really bad. And when she told me about it, it was really tough for her. But since I was starting to date, felt like she had to tell me what happened. And so going back to the post-traumatic, I don't know if it exactly is post-traumatic.
No, it sounds like it.
Whenever she sees, like if she were to look at that wall, she might have a problem with it.
Or these blue
Kinda
chairs.
strange. It's more of a big area. The chairs would be okay.
I didn't know if the color was right.
I've had a couple of times in my life when I was in therapy and I started remembering what had happened. That was real difficult. And then about 10 or 12 years later, I quit smoking, and I don't know what all that did, but I stopped being codependent, and I quit smoking, and I started.
And you were a heavy smoker.
Right, I smoked 3 packs a day. I don't do anything halfway. I either do it or I don't. But anyway, so when I quit, and I made a lot of changes in my life in a real short period of time, and I started taking action, and I worked really hard to stop reacting to everything and to stop being just this emotional,
Crutch.
blithering idiot. I don't know what it was, but anyway, I went through a really bad period of time where I was just living constant flashbacks, and it was really difficult. It was really, really difficult. I don't know why that happened. I just know all of those things happened in a short period of time, and they happened together, and I'm sure that there's some interconnecting stuff there. I don't know what. I had, because I had made so many changes, all the people in my life were, except for my husband, who just didn't know what to do. He just trusted me. He just didn't know what to do with me because I was making so many changes. All the other people in my life that were freaking out, going, change back, change back, change back. And I was going, no, I can't. I'm really freaking out and I'm having a really terrible time, but I can't go back and do that stuff anymore. I can't take care of your kids. I can't cook for you. I can't come and sit in the emergency room with you for the 25th time because you are not smart enough to go to the doctor. That you only go to the emergency room in the middle of the night because you have brain damage when it comes to taking care of your body. I cannot, do this and this and this.
Type
I cannot,
all the term papers.
Yeah, I
for
can't
every
type term
person.
papers for everybody in my life. There's just a limit, and I've gone way past it now, and we're going to stop taking care of everybody else. So anyway, so I just removed myself from the situation, and through a lot of prayer, got better. And I seem to be okay now. It's been a while. And
She thinks.
I don't have flashbacks anymore. Haven't had any since then.
And I didn't know her in her former life, so we just all have to take her testimony together here.
But you have to be, my advice to you, if you have a friend who's going through some kind of flashbacks, or a relative, or somebody that you care about, or a total stranger who comes up to you and is freaking out, probably that won't happen. But just let them do what they need to do to get better. Trust them, because it's happening to them and you cannot know how
Ask
bad
them
it
what
is.
they need.
Yeah.
They might be able to tell you.
Yeah, they will. But they will. They will do what the best that they can. But you may need to help them. But the best thing you can do is love them, even though it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If it was happening to you, it still wouldn't make sense.
I have an opportunity to work with teenagers, and I was thinking one particular girl had gone through a lot, and she just said, nobody will listen to me in my life. And I found myself wanting to say, well, look what you're doing, because she kept getting into abusive relationships with teenage boys. But I found myself, the only thing she really needed was, she really needed to talk through some of the things that were going to happen in her life, because she's very hard-headed. But when you say that they need somebody to love them, I think a part of loving is just listening to someone, even though you want to have this tendency to want to fix it or whatever you want to do, but just listening to them.
And not discounting or doubting. It didn't happen to you. And that's while what the stories people tell may not be exactly what happened from a perfectly objective point of view, it's what happened to them. And that's different. In a crisis situation, in your family, Edna, I'm sure what happened to you is not what happened to your sisters, and it's not what happened to your mom. Even though y'all were in the same house, experiencing the same kind of stuff one way or another, your perspectives are totally different, and you had totally different things happen to you.
I can say one really big thing. I mean, this is like, I've never ever really talked to anybody about any of the stuff that I've ever happened. So I never really figured I needed therapy or any kind of help, I'm okay, I'm fine the way I am, just keeping everything inside, I can do it. And like now, this is the first time I've been back to school in a year and a half, because I went through a lot of stuff at home. So this is just like really cool, I'm telling all this stuff, and it feels good, and I don't know how to feel, because I'm not used to this, I'm not used to feeling good about myself and really knowing who I am and how to take care of myself and what to do and stuff, and it's like completely new. So I mean, if anything, if you ever know anybody who goes through that stuff, talk to them, listen to them, just let them dump everything on you, because it feels really good.
Good. Good. Well, here's just an interesting tidbit. In Germany, just now, we think things are bad here. In Germany, they just now are considering criminalizing marital rape, because wives were possessions, and they should do whatever they were told. But there was an article in the paper just sometime in the last 6 weeks, just now, they've decided that probably they should make it criminal if a wife is raped. The only things you can do to prevent rape are to be aware, pay attention, make the best choices you can, and know that it could happen to you anyway. You can be asleep in your apartment or your house, and someone can break in and rape you. It doesn't matter if you're 92 years old and ugly as sin. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how you dress. It doesn't matter. You cannot make yourself be a woman who will never get raped. There's nothing you can do to make it not happen, because it happens to people of all different sizes, shapes, descriptions, skin color, skin shape. I won't go off on this much, but I'll just go into this a little. In Wichita and around Wichita, there are 7 satanic cults, and that sounds really terrible, and it is. But they start sexually assaulting the females when they are infants, and the girls are assaulted so many times through the course of their life that many of them have multiple personality disorders and have some real serious problems, and they just numb themselves to it, but they have no control because other people are controlling their lives. So if I ever get depressed about the things that have happened to me, I think there's always somebody who's had it worse. Always somebody who's had it worse.
And the
No matter
bottom
how bad.
line
Oh, the bottom line is, whether it's physical or sexual assault, don't keep secrets. Yes.
Something to
quick.
say to you real quick is that also something that can help you get through a bad experience is that it could teach you a lesson, make you stronger. Look at all the help that you're giving other people now, the strength you're giving to people, and how much you're helping others so it doesn't happen to them, and it won't happen to you again, hopefully.
And for that, we say thank you,
Thank you.
and we pause there.